Tuesday afternoon at the Opal Heights Hotel, a luxurious but often underwhelming haven for the weary elite. Amy had been working the front desk for over a year, long enough to know the type. A steady stream of polished suits, gold credit cards, and perfectly timed smiles filled the lobby on a daily basis. They were all the same, she thought. The entitled rich who never seemed to understand what it took to actually get ahead in life. She was tired, so tired of it all. Her eyes were red from the late shifts, her coffee cup half empty for the third time that day. The warm air of the lobby hummed softly as guests drifted in and out, and the repetitive sound of the keycards clicking in the machines felt like an endless loop in her head. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? And then, like a shift in the air, the doors opened with a soft jingle. A man walked in. Amy barely looked up from her phone, still scrolling through her social media feed. The man didn't strike her as anything special, not that she expected anyone to be. He was casually dressed, jeans, a simple hoodie, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. Typical, she thought. Probably some tech geek on vacation, trying to pretend he was a regular guy. She wasn't in the mood to deal with anyone's nonsense today. "Welcome to Opal Heights," she muttered with an obligatory smile, her eyes still glued to her phone. "How may I assist you today?" He didn't respond immediately, but Amy sensed he was looking at the large marble counter in front of her. She clicked her tongue, annoyed. It wasn't like she was giving him the cold shoulder on purpose, but she had long since stopped going out of her way for people like him. She already knew the drill. They'd complain about the price of the room or demand a suite that wasn't available. He cleared his throat, and that made her look up. Something about his gaze seemed different, unbothered. But maybe it was just the kind of self-assured confidence that came with wealth. "I need to check in," he said, his voice calm but with an edge that made her pause for a moment. "I made a reservation under Musk." She stifled a scoff. Of course, he was one of those people, trying to act all cool with a fake last name that could pass as elite. A subtle flex, as if she wouldn't notice. "Sure," she said, still half expecting him to break into a grin and reveal some sort of reality show twist. One moment, as she typed on the keyboard, her frustration built. She wasn't a celebrity concierge. She wasn't interested in people who thought they could just waltz in and demand the best. She checked the reservation system, running the name Musk through the system. Nothing. No match. Amy sighed. "I'm sorry, there seems to be an issue with your booking. Can I get a phone number to confirm your reservation?" The man's brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't seem upset. "You can just call the manager. I'm Elon Musk." Amy's fingers froze on the keyboard. Elon Musk? That name rang a bell. Of course it did. Every tech news outlet had covered him. But she wasn't into tech or all those billionaire dramas. To her, he was just another overhyped personality with an inflated ego. So, she shrugged it off and put her best customer service smile back on. "Sure, let me get the manager," she said flatly, pressing a button under the desk. Her fingers grazed over the phone, and in that moment, her exhaustion was palpable. "Let him speak to the manager then. I'm done with this today." She barely looked at him when she turned to signal her colleague, Sarah, who was standing by the door. "Sarah, can you help this gentleman with his booking? He says he's Elon Musk?" She said the name with an exaggerated eye roll, underestimating the possibility of who this man might truly be. The manager didn't miss a beat. Sarah walked over, her posture immediately straightening. "Mr. Musk, welcome to Opal Heights. We've been expecting you. Please, follow me to your suite." Amy blinked. Wait a second. That wasn't the response she expected. In fact, it wasn't what anyone in the hotel would expect. She looked up, trying to make sense of the situation, but before she could say anything else, Sarah had already escorted the man to the elevator. As the doors closed with a soft chime, Amy felt a lump form in her throat. Something didn't feel right. What just happened? The words escaped Amy's mouth before she could stop them. She glanced around, suddenly realizing the odd silence in the lobby. She turned back to her desk. The room felt colder now, emptier somehow. She knew who Elon Musk was, of course, but it was all too easy to forget that he might show up at a random hotel in LA without any warning. The man who had revolutionized electric cars and sent rockets into space. And now, she had made the mistake of dismissing him like any other guest. That had to sting. Did you just treat him like that? Sarah's voice came from behind her, sharp with disbelief. Amy spun around, her face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't know. He didn't act like he was someone important. Sarah crossed her arms. Well, now you know. Elon Musk is one of the co-owners of this hotel chain, and he just bought the penthouse for a month. The last person I want to see you treating like that is him. Amy's stomach churned. She was too stunned to speak. You know what's the worst part? Sarah said, her voice softer now. The worst part is you didn't even give him a chance to speak for himself. Amy sank into her chair, her face burning. She realized now how quickly she had judged him. She hadn't given him the benefit of the doubt, just assumed he was another rich person trying to exploit the system. But what if he wasn't? As the seconds ticked by, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just let something significant slip right through her fingers. Amy's hands trembled slightly as she stared at her computer screen. It had only been a few minutes since the interaction with Elon Musk, but it felt like hours. The uncomfortable silence in the lobby echoed in her ears, and she tried to shake off the weight of the moment. She had really messed up. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this way. This combination of shame, confusion, and anger all wrapped into one. It wasn't just about the mistake. It was about the fact that she didn't care at the time. She had been so caught up in her own bitterness that she hadn't stopped to consider who she was speaking to. Amy leaned back in her chair, looking up at the ornate chandelier that hung above the lobby. The hotel was beautiful, an oasis in the middle of Los Angeles. The kind of place where celebrities and billionaires came to hide out, whether for a weekend or a month. People who had everything, except perhaps humility. Her eyes drifted across the room. The lobby was quiet now, the other guests tucked away in their luxury suites. The clock above the fireplace read 4:30 p.m. It was always slow at this time of day. The early rush had passed, and the late check-ins hadn't started trickling in yet. For Amy, it was just another boring afternoon at a job she'd started to resent more than she cared to admit. Amy had never imagined she would be here, working as a receptionist at a luxury hotel. A year ago, she was living in a cramped apartment in a rundown part of the city, struggling to make ends meet while working part-time jobs. A job at Opal Heights had seemed like a way out. But in reality, it had just added more layers of frustration to her life. She wasn't where she thought she'd be by now, not by a long shot. This wasn't the plan, she thought, slumping further into her chair. Amy had always been smart. Or at least, she thought she was. She had graduated high school with honors, and she was accepted into a good college, where she studied business administration. Her dream was always to climb the corporate ladder, to make a name for herself, to become someone who could take charge of her own destiny. But after a few years of trying to juggle late-night study sessions with the pressures of working 3 jobs to pay tuition, she had dropped out. The dream of a comfortable life slipped further away as she realized the world wasn't as kind to someone who didn't have a family fortune or the right connections. It's about who you know, not what you know, she'd heard too many times. Her friends back home didn't get it. They all had some kind of safety net, rich parents or generous trust funds. Amy didn't. She had to claw her way through everything, and it felt like the harder she tried, the further behind she fell. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to the present. She glanced at the screen. A text from her mom. "How's work going, sweetie? Hope things are getting better." Amy couldn't help but laugh bitterly to herself. It was always the same message, full of false optimism. Amy loved her mom, but she couldn't help but feel that her mom just didn't get it. She had grown up in a small town, where most of the people were content with their lives. They didn't know what it was like to struggle in a city like Ellick, trying to scrape together enough for rent and groceries while chasing a dream that seemed so far out of reach. Amy quickly typed out a response. Work is work, same as always. But that wasn't the truth. Deep down, Amy was resentful. Resentful of people like Elon Musk, who could stroll in and out of a hotel without a care in the world. Resentful of the people who didn't have to work as hard as she did, simply because they were born with money or privilege. Amy's thoughts were interrupted by Sarah, who walked up to her desk with a gentle knock on the counter. "Hey, Amy," she said softly, the kind of tone reserved for someone who had just done something really wrong. Can we talk? Amy's stomach dropped. She knew where this was going. I know you're upset, Sarah continued, sitting down across from Amy, but you can't let something like this get to you. You'll just make it worse. Amy opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out. She wasn't sure if she was angry at Sarah or herself. What could she even say? She just made a fool of herself in front of one of the richest men in the world. And worse, she hadn't even recognized him. Look, Sarah said, seeing the frustration in Amy's eyes. I know you didn't mean to offend him, but you're going to have to own up to it. He's not some guy off the street. He's a co-owner of this hotel chain. This could be a huge opportunity for you if you handle it right. Amy stared at Sarah in disbelief. Co-owner? No way, Amy mumbled, her mind racing. Are you serious? Sarah nodded. Yes, I am. Musk's been involved in this hotel for years now. I was actually supposed to brief you on that, but I didn't think I had to. Amy swallowed hard, the weight of her mistake becoming heavier with every word. I messed up, didn't I? Her voice was barely above a whisper. You did, Sarah replied gently, but everyone makes mistakes. The question is, how are you going to handle it? Amy wasn't sure how to answer that. She had just treated a man who could have changed her life like he was just another arrogant rich guy. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had always believed that money made people arrogant, selfish, and out of touch with reality. And she had plenty of reasons to feel that way. She'd seen it all. People who were born into wealth, acting like the world owed them something. But now, she was starting to realize that maybe she had been wrong. Maybe not all rich people were like that. And maybe, just maybe, she needed to stop assuming the worst about people. As she sat there, Sarah's words echoed in her mind. This could be a huge opportunity. Amy didn't know exactly what that opportunity would look like. But if she didn't screw this up again, maybe she'd find out soon enough. Amy could barely focus the next few days. The sting of her first interaction with Elon Musk hung over her like a cloud. Every time she passed the front desk, the memory of his face, the calm confidence, the lack of judgment, and her own blundering arrogance flashed in her mind. She tried to keep busy, answering calls, checking guests in, and acting like everything was fine. But the weight of her mistake was too much. She found herself constantly scanning the lobby, half expecting Elon to walk in again and deliver the kind of pointed remark that would cement how badly she had screwed up. It wasn't until the third day after the incident that Amy finally saw him again. It was late afternoon when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. And there he was, Elon Musk, standing in the lobby, casually scrolling through his phone. He wore the same hoodie and jeans, the same understated look that had thrown her off last time. But this time, Amy was ready. Or at least she thought she was. He didn't look at her at first, but Amy noticed something different. There was a calmness in his demeanor, an aura that felt a little less detached than the last time. He took a slow walk toward the front desk, and Amy's heart raced. She had no idea what to say. Did she apologize? Ignore the whole thing? Act like nothing happened? Hey, Elon said, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than she had expected, almost warm, but with a hint of curiosity. I was hoping to speak to the manager again. Amy swallowed hard. Sure, I'll let Sarah know. She turned to reach for the phone, but something stopped her. The words came out before she could think. Mr. Musk, she began, her voice uncertain, but genuine. I owe you an apology. Elon paused. His eyes shifted to meet hers, and there was no anger there, just a calm understanding, as if he'd been expecting it. What for? I didn't recognize you the other day, Amy admitted, feeling her cheeks flush. I treated you like any other guest, and I shouldn't have. I wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I really regret how I handled it. For a moment, Elon didn't say anything. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. Amy's stomach twisted in knots. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable in front of someone who was, by all accounts, a stranger to her. Finally, Elon spoke. It's okay. His voice was calm, as if he'd heard these kinds of things before. Honestly, it's a good reminder that not everyone knows who I am. Most people don't care. and that's refreshing. Amy blinked, taken aback. Refreshing? What did he mean by that? He continued. I get that people have expectations, but I like to live outside of them. I don't need everyone to treat me like some kind of celebrity or business mogul. His gaze softened as he looked at her. I appreciate your honesty. Not a lot of people are willing to admit when they've made a mistake. Amy's mind raced. This wasn't at all how she had imagined this conversation would go. She thought he would brush her off, maybe even scold her for her behavior, but instead, he seemed to be giving her a free pass. You're right, she said, after a long pause. I've got a lot of assumptions about people who have a lot of money. It's easy to lump everyone into the same category, but that's unfair. And I shouldn't have judged you. Elon tilted his head slightly, studying her for a moment. It happens, he said simply, but it sounds like you're aware of it now. That's the important part. Amy let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This wasn't the confrontation I was expecting, she thought. There was no anger in his tone, no superiority, just understanding. As the conversation wound down, Elon mentioned he was about to head out to a meeting. He smiled briefly before nodding toward the elevator. Thanks for the honesty, Amy. I'll catch you later. Of course, Amy replied, still trying to wrap her head around what had just happened. As he walked toward the elevator, she noticed something she hadn't before. Elon wasn't just a billionaire tech mogul. He wasn't even trying to impress anyone. He was just a guy who had made mistakes, just like anyone else. When he disappeared behind the elevator doors, Amy stood frozen for a few moments, processing what had just occurred. She couldn't remember the last time someone had treated her with such a mix of kindness and neutrality. In that brief interaction, Elon had shown her something she hadn't expected, a humility that seemed to contradict everything she thought she knew about people and power. The next few days were a blur of self-reflection. Amy found herself thinking more deeply about her assumptions, her judgments, and the way she saw the world. It wasn't just Elon Musk she had misunderstood. It was everyone. She realized that her bitterness, her anger, and her feelings of being left behind had clouded her perspective for far too long. She started paying more attention to the people she interacted with, trying to understand their stories instead of assuming she already knew who they were. Little by little, she felt a shift in herself, a subtle but powerful change. On the 5th day after the encounter, Sarah approached her again, this time with a different tone. So, what did you learn? Sarah asked, an eyebrow raised. Amy smiled, more to herself than to Sarah. I learned that people are a lot more than what we see on the surface. And I learned that I have a lot of work to do on myself. Sarah nodded, her expression softening. You're getting it. The hardest part is realizing where you're wrong, but that's where growth starts. Amy's heart lightened, and for the first time in a while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't stuck. There was hope for her yet. Amy had no idea how much a single interaction could change the course of her life. It had only been a few days since her awkward encounter with Elon Musk, but already she was seeing the world through a new lens. Every conversation, every glance, and every small interaction felt like it had more weight to it. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just going through the motions. It was a quiet Wednesday when Amy's shift was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. She had just finished checking in a couple who had arrived from out of town, and the lobby was unusually calm for the time of day. She reached for the phone on the desk, ready to handle the usual inquiries, but the voice on the other end made her freeze. Hello, is this Amy? The voice was calm and friendly, but there was a definite authority to it. Yes, this is Amy, she replied, trying to mask the sudden jolt of anxiety that had struck her. How can I help you? This is Sarah, the hotel manager. I need you to come upstairs. Mr. Musk would like to speak with you. Amy's stomach dropped. The first thought that hit her was, oh no, I messed up again. She had no idea what this meeting would be about. Was he going to lecture her about her behavior? Was he going to tell her she was fired? Her mind raced with 1,000 worst-case scenarios. Okay, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll be up there in a minute. When Amy arrived at the top floor, she was greeted by Sarah, who led her down a long hallway to a spacious suite. As they walked, Sarah said nothing, her expression unreadable. The silence between them was thick with anticipation. "Mr. Musk is expecting you," Sarah said, opening the door to one of the most luxurious suites Amy had ever seen. The view from the windows was breathtaking, overlooking the entire city, the skyline stretching far into the distance. The decor was sleek, modern, and minimalist, with shades of gold and gray that screamed elegance. But it wasn't the suite that made Amy nervous. It was the man sitting by the window, gazing out at the city below. Elon Musk. He turned as Amy entered, giving her a small nod. He was dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans, but his presence was anything but understated. There was something magnetic about him, something that made Amy feel even smaller than she already did. "Sit down, Amy," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. His tone was calm, almost welcoming, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made her feel like she was walking into a high-stakes meeting. Amy sat down, trying to compose herself. She had no idea what this conversation was going to be about, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was going to be important. "Elon," she began, feeling awkward. "I'm really sorry about what happened the other day. I didn't mean to treat you like that." Elon smiled, a small, knowing smile that softened his features. "Amy, I'm not here to make you feel bad about that. You've already apologized, and I appreciate that. What I want to talk to you about is something different." Amy blinked, confused. "Something different? What do you mean?" "I've been watching you," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly, "and I see a lot of potential in you." Amy didn't know what to say. Potential? In her? She barely managed to finish her college degree, let alone make something of herself. She wasn't sure if he was just being polite or if he was actually serious. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not like the other people I've met," Elon continued. "You don't have the entitlement or the arrogance that most of them do. You've got a kind of raw honesty about you. And honestly, that's something I respect." Amy's mind was spinning. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why was he saying this? Was this some kind of test? "I've been in this business for a long time, Amy," Elon said, his voice a little softer now. "And I've learned that the best leaders, the ones who make the biggest impact, are the ones who are willing to see beyond themselves. The ones who can connect with people on a real level. I think you have that ability." Amy stared at him, trying to process his words. Was he suggesting that she could be someone like him? That she could make an impact? It felt surreal. "I know it's hard to believe, but you're more than just a receptionist," Elon continued, as if reading her thoughts. "And I'm giving you an opportunity to prove that." Amy blinked, feeling a sudden surge of emotion. What kind of opportunity?" "I've been working on a new initiative," Elon said, leaning forward slightly. "It's something that could change the way people think about business, and I want you to be a part of it. I need someone who understands what it's like to work hard, someone who's had to fight for everything they've earned. Someone like you." Amy felt her heart race. Was this real? Was he really offering her a chance to work with him? "But why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a receptionist." Elon gave a small chuckle. "I've worked with enough business experts to know that they don't have the real-world experience I'm looking for. You've got that experience, Amy, and that's why I'm asking you." Amy's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea how to respond. She had spent so much time doubting herself, convincing herself that she wasn't worthy of opportunities like this. But now, Elon Musk, one of the most influential figures in tech, was offering her a chance. She left the meeting with her mind racing, unsure of what had just happened. She wasn't sure if she was being tested or if this was real, but there was no denying it. The opportunity of a lifetime had just been handed to her. As she walked back down the hallway, Sarah fell into step beside her. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice light but filled with genuine concern. I think so," Amy said, her voice shaky. "I don't even know what just happened. He offered me a chance to work with him on a new project." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "No way. That's amazing. What are you going to do?" Amy shook her head, still processing. "I don't know. I need some time to think." As she sat back at her desk later that evening, Amy couldn't stop thinking about what Elon had said. She had always felt like she was stuck in a cycle, never quite able to get ahead. But now, she saw a glimmer of something different. Maybe it was time for her to stop holding herself back. Maybe it was time for her to take a leap and prove that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Amy sat on the edge of her bed that night, her phone in hand, staring at the text she had just received from Sarah. "I'm serious, Amy. This is a huge deal. Take the opportunity." She had been replaying the conversation with Elon over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of it all. A part of her still couldn't quite believe it. Elon Musk, the Elon Musk, had offered her a chance to work on one of his projects, a chance to change everything. But it was more than just the opportunity. It was the pressure of the choice. Could she do it? Was she ready for something like this? And what would it mean for her life if she said yes? Amy had always struggled with uncertainty. She liked the predictability of her routine, even though she often felt like it trapped her in a cycle of mediocrity. The steady paycheck, the familiar faces, the comfort of knowing what to expect. It was easier than taking risks. It was safer. But now, this new path was beckoning, and it was anything but safe. Her mind raced with thoughts of the consequences. If she said yes, she would be leaving everything she knew behind. The job she was comfortable with, the small world she had built for herself. It would be a step into the unknown, and the unknown terrified her. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? But then there was the other side of the equation. What if she succeeded? What if this was her chance to prove everyone, including herself, that she was capable of so much more? What would it mean for me? She thought. It could mean more than just a career change. It could mean a fresh start, a chance to learn, to grow, to be someone different. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought back to her past, her small-town life, the never-ending struggle to make ends meet. She had spent so much time focused on what she didn't have, on how unfair life was. But this was an opportunity that could help her escape that mindset. It could help her finally believe in herself, in her abilities. But at the same time, there was the weight of the risk. And there were still the voices in her head telling her she wasn't enough. You don't have the skills, you don't have the experience, you're just a receptionist. She had spent so long convincing herself that people like Elon Musk, people who had made it big, lived in a different world, a world she didn't belong to. She took a deep breath and scrolled through her messages again. Sarah had sent a few more texts after the first one. "You've got the drive, Amy. Don't let self-doubt hold you back. Trust me, you're going to regret it if you don't take this chance." Her heart beat faster as she looked out the window. The city lights below seemed to blink at her, each one a reminder of the vast world beyond her current life. She had always dreamed of something bigger. She had always told herself she wanted more. But now that the chance was here, she felt paralyzed. Amy grabbed her jacket and headed out. She needed air, space to think without the constant hum of doubt clouding her judgment. She walked around the block, her mind spinning with a million thoughts. She found herself at a small park near the hotel, sitting on a bench under the glow of a street lamp. It was there, under the cool night sky, that she started to see things clearly. She thought about all the people who had made it big, the ones who weren't afraid to fail, the ones who took chances when no one else would. They weren't perfect. They weren't without flaws. But they had something she had always been missing: confidence. The ability to look at a challenge and say, "I can do this." For the first time, Amy realized that she could do this too. The feeling of fear that had held her back for so long wasn't a sign that she should retreat. It was a sign that she was on the edge of something incredible. The fear wasn't there to stop her. It was there to push her forward. She stood up from the bench, a sense of clarity washing over her. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let this moment slip away. The next morning, she called Sarah to let her know. "I'm in," Amy said, her voice steady and sure. "I'll do it. I'm ready for this opportunity." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Sarah's voice cracked with excitement. "Amy, that's amazing. I knew you had it in you." "I'm scared, though," Amy admitted, her voice a little softer. "I'm not sure I'm ready, but I can't keep running from this." "You don't have to be ready right now," Sarah reassured her. "That's what the opportunity is about. You'll grow, you'll learn, and you'll figure it out along the way." Later that afternoon, Amy sent a text to Elon. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm ready to get started. Within minutes, Elon replied. Great to hear, Amy. Let's make this happen. Amy smiled to herself, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. She had made the decision. Now, it was time to step into a new chapter of her life. She wasn't sure where it would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't be the same person when she came out the other side. For the first time in years, Amy felt like she was in control of her own destiny. The days after Amy made her decision felt like a whirlwind. She had always been someone who took things one step at a time, but now, everything was happening so fast. She barely had time to process one thing before the next opportunity arrived, and it was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Her first official day with Elon's project came sooner than she expected. The morning of her first meeting, she was a bundle of nerves, pacing back and forth in her small apartment, trying to figure out what to wear. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Of all the things to stress about, I'm worrying about my outfit? But this wasn't just any meeting. This was her chance to prove herself, to show that she belonged in the world she had only ever dreamed of. By the time she arrived at the office, her nerves had settled slightly, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. The building was nothing like the hotel lobby she was used to. It was sleek, modern, and the walls were lined with screens displaying the latest tech innovations. The atmosphere was alive with a quiet energy, the hum of ideas being exchanged, the pulse of something big in the making. Amy was greeted by one of Elon's assistants, a woman in her late 20s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. Hi, you must be Amy, the assistant said with a warm but professional smile. I'm Kate. Welcome. Elon's expecting you. Kate led her into a spacious conference room. There were several people already seated at the long table, most of them in business attire, some wearing t-shirts and jeans, a few with casual blazers. Amy felt out of place in her black blouse and pencil skirt, but she did her best to mask her discomfort. Elon was sitting at the head of the table, looking every bit the tech mogul. But when he saw Amy walk in, his face broke into a genuine smile. Glad you could make it, he said, standing up to greet her. We're excited to have you on board. Amy nodded, her heart skipping a beat. Thank you for this chance, Mr. Musk. I'm really excited to be here. Elon motioned for her to take a seat. Please call me Elon. We're all on a first-name basis here. The meeting began, and Amy quickly realized that this wasn't going to be the type of corporate meeting she was used to. There were no long-winded presentations or complicated spreadsheets. Instead, people were discussing ideas with passion, tossing concepts around as though they were playing an intellectual game of catch. Elon, despite his high status, wasn't the type to dominate the conversation. He listened attentively, asked insightful questions, and occasionally cracked jokes, making everyone feel at ease. There was a raw energy in the room, a sense that something big was in the works, and Amy found herself drawn into it. At one point, Elon turned to her, noticing she hadn't said much since the meeting started. Amy, you've been a bit quiet. What are your thoughts on this? He asked, a curious glint in his eye. All eyes in the room turned to her, and Amy felt a wave of self-doubt wash over her. Why did I have to be so quiet? Why didn't I speak up? But then she remembered what he had said to her the day they first met. You've got potential. You understand what it's like to fight for something. With that in mind, she pushed her nerves aside and spoke up. Well, from my perspective, she began, feeling her confidence slowly build. It seems like this project is more than just about technology. It's about how we're going to change people's lives. The way we integrate the user experience with the product is going to be the game changer. If we focus too much on the technical side and not enough on the emotional connection, we'll miss the mark. There was a brief pause in the room. Amy's heart pounded in her chest. Did I say the wrong thing? But then Elon nodded thoughtfully. You know, I agree, he said, leaning forward. That's the kind of thinking I was hoping for. I'm glad you're here. By the time the meeting wrapped up, Amy was exhausted but invigorated. The room had come alive with ideas, and she had played a small part in sparking a new direction. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her a sense of belonging. She was no longer just the receptionist. She was a part of something bigger. Over the next few weeks, Amy threw herself into the project. There were still moments of doubt, moments when she felt like an imposter, but each time she contributed, each time her ideas were taken seriously, those feelings began to fade. She found herself surrounded by brilliant people, engineers, designers, and thinkers who were all passionate about making a difference. She didn't have all the answers, but she had something just as valuable: the ability to ask the right questions, to challenge assumptions, and to bring a fresh perspective to the table. She worked late nights, brainstorming new ideas, sketching designs, and diving deep into market research. There were setbacks, of course. Not every idea worked, and there were plenty of moments when things didn't go as planned. But Amy had learned something crucial. Failure wasn't the end. It was a lesson, a stepping stone toward something better. One afternoon, as Amy walked out of the office for a much-needed break, she caught sight of Elon in the hallway. He was alone, scrolling through his phone. When he saw her, he waved and smiled. "How's it going?" he asked, stopping in front of her. "It's going great," Amy said, her voice upbeat. "I'm learning a lot." He raised an eyebrow. "What's been the biggest challenge so far?" Amy thought for a moment. "Honestly, getting out of my own head. I've spent so much time doubting myself, thinking I'm not qualified for this, that it's taken a while to realize I do belong here." Elon nodded. "That's the hardest part for most people, believing they deserve the opportunity. But you're here because you earned it, Amy. And I can tell you're starting to see that." Amy smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in ages, she felt like she was on the right path. That night, as she sat in her apartment, reflecting on how far she had come, Amy realized something. She wasn't just working for Elon Musk anymore. She wasn't just part of some high-tech project. She was working for herself. Every decision she made, every challenge she faced, was pushing her toward a version of herself she had always dreamed of. Someone confident, capable, and ready to take on whatever came next. It wasn't just about the job. It was about who she was becoming. The days blurred together as Amy threw herself into her new role. What had started as a mere opportunity to learn and grow quickly transformed into something far more intense, a real challenge. Elon's project was ambitious. The stakes were high, and Amy was beginning to realize just how much she had to offer. She had learned to trust her instincts, to use her past experiences, and to challenge her own assumptions. But she was far from comfortable, and sometimes that discomfort was the most powerful thing she could experience. It was a rainy Thursday when Amy found herself in the conference room again. The team had gathered to review the progress of their latest prototype, and the tension was palpable. Everyone seemed to be on edge, as if the success of the project rested on this one meeting. The prototype wasn't perfect. There were glitches, inconsistencies, and some serious technical hurdles to overcome. But despite the setbacks, there was a certain electricity in the air, as if everyone could feel they were on the edge of something revolutionary. Amy was sitting at the end of the table, quietly listening to the team discuss solutions. She had spent the last few days working with the design and marketing teams to refine their user interface, but she had yet to speak up during this particular meeting. Most of the team members, including Elon, were focused on the technical issues, trying to figure out how to fix the bugs in the prototype. But Amy's mind was elsewhere. She glanced down at the laptop in front of her, reviewing the user feedback they had gathered from initial testers. Something about the comments stood out to her. There was a common thread she couldn't ignore. "Hey, Elon," she said, breaking the conversation. All eyes turned to her, and she felt the usual rush of nerves flood her chest. But this time, she didn't hesitate. She had a point, and she knew it needed to be heard. "There's something we've missed," she said, meeting Elon's gaze. "We've been so focused on fixing the bugs and the tech that we've forgotten to think about the emotional experience for the user. I've been reviewing the feedback, and the testers aren't as excited about the product as we thought they'd be." Elon leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Amy took a breath. "It's not just about usability. It's about how the product makes them feel. It's about connection. People don't want just a tool. They want something that makes them feel like they're part of something bigger, like they're part of a movement. If we don't address that emotional gap, we might lose them." There was a brief silence in the room. Then, slowly, a few people nodded, including Elon. "You're right," he said after a beat. "I think we've been too focused on the mechanics. Let's step back and think about the bigger picture. Amy's heart raced, but she could tell she had struck a chord. This was what she had been trying to articulate for weeks, the emotional connection, the human aspect of the project. She knew that without it, the product would fall flat, no matter how advanced or impressive it was on the surface. Over the next few days, Amy found herself at the center of several discussions on refining the emotional aspect of the product. The team brainstormed ways to incorporate storytelling, user-centered design, and more intuitive features that would appeal to people on a personal level. They explored creative concepts that went beyond the technical specs, something Amy was passionate about. She spent hours researching, writing new proposals, and reworking presentations to emphasize the deeper impact of their work. She knew they weren't just building a product, they were building a legacy. But not everyone agreed with her ideas. In one particularly heated meeting, one of the engineers, Mike, expressed frustration with Amy's focus on the emotional side of things. "This isn't a feel-good project, Amy," Mike said, his tone sharp. "It's about technology, not about how people feel when they use it. We're not selling hugs here." Amy felt the sting of his words, but she refused to back down. "It's not about selling hugs, Mike. It's about creating something that resonates with people on a real level. If we don't connect with them, they won't care how advanced the technology is. We'll just be another product on the shelf." Mike scoffed, but Elon intervened before the tension could escalate. "Amy has a point," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not all about the code. It's about how that code interacts with the world. Mike, I think we can find a balance." Amy couldn't help but feel a sense of validation, though the conversation left her feeling more drained than ever. It was clear that she was beginning to break down barriers, not just in terms of the product, but also within the team. Her ideas were challenging the status quo, and that wasn't always going to be easy. The next day, Amy received a message from Sarah. It was brief, but powerful. "I heard about the meeting yesterday. You handled that so well. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Amy smiled at the text, her heart swelling with gratitude. Sarah had been her biggest supporter from the very beginning, and even though they didn't work together every day, it felt good to know someone had her back. But not everything was going smoothly. As the project progressed, Amy began to feel the weight of her responsibilities more than ever. The pressure was mounting, and there were moments when the exhaustion almost felt too much to bear. One particularly late night, after an intense brainstorming session, Amy sat alone in the conference room, staring at the whiteboard filled with scribbled notes and ideas. Her head was spinning, and she could feel the pull of burnout creeping in. She had been working nonstop, trying to keep up with the pace of the team, but there were still so many unanswered questions, so many things she didn't know. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her mother, who had been calling less frequently lately. "How's the project going, sweetie? We're so proud of you. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Amy's heart softened at the message. Her mother's words reminded her that, even though she was in the midst of something big, she couldn't forget to take a step back sometimes. She needed to recharge, to refocus, and to remember why she started this journey in the first place. As Amy stepped away from the conference room, she decided it was time to take a short break. She went for a walk around the building, allowing the cool air to clear her mind. The city lights twinkled ahead of her, and for a moment, she felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. She had come so far already, and even though there was more work ahead, she was beginning to realize that this wasn't just a job, it was her calling. The obstacles, the doubts, the challenges, they were all part of the process. And with each one she overcame, she grew stronger. When she returned to the office, she was ready to dive back in. There was still a long road ahead, but Amy felt more confident than ever that she was on the right path. The team had started to see the value of her perspective, and she was determined to continue breaking down the barriers that stood between them and their goal. For the first time, she didn't just feel like a cog in the machine. She was the spark that could ignite the change. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of meetings, late nights, and breakthroughs. Amy had become a crucial part of the team, and with each passing day, her role felt less like a lucky break and more like something she had truly earned. But as much as the project was moving forward, so were the stakes. Elon had recently brought in a few major investors to help push the project toward the final stages of development. These investors were keen on seeing results, fast. The pressure on the team was building, and with it, the tension in the office grew palpable. Amy had always believed that the best work came from an environment that was relaxed and open to creativity. But now, with deadlines looming and expectations rising, the atmosphere felt different. Every team member was on edge, pushing themselves harder, focusing less on the bigger picture and more on immediate results. One Monday morning, Amy entered the office to find the place buzzing with activity. People were speaking in hushed voices, moving quickly from one task to another. It felt like the calm before a storm. Kate, Elon's assistant, approached her as soon as she walked in. "Amy, Elon wants to see you in his office." "It's important," she said, her voice tight with an edge of urgency. Amy's stomach dropped. It had been a few days since she'd last had a one-on-one with Elon. She took a deep breath and walked to his office, trying to shake off the sense of foreboding that had settled over her. When she knocked and entered, Elon was sitting behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. "Good morning, Amy. Thanks for coming in," he said, looking up with a brief smile. "Have a seat." She sat down, her heart racing. Elon didn't waste any time. "I want to talk to you about something that's come up with the investors," he began, his tone calm but serious. "They're getting anxious. They want results, and they want them quickly. I need everyone to ramp up production. This project needs to move faster." Amy nodded, though she felt a pang of unease. Faster? She had been working at full throttle already. The idea of pushing things further was almost too much to comprehend. "I understand," she said, her voice steady, "but I think we need to be careful. We can't sacrifice quality for speed. We've already made so much progress, but rushing now could ruin the work we've done so far." Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I know you're committed to this project, Amy, and I appreciate your dedication, but we don't have the luxury of time anymore. I need you to think about how we can speed things up without compromising on the core ideas we've developed. You've got the vision, and I trust you to lead the way here." Amy felt a mix of excitement and fear. Elon's trust in her was humbling, but the weight of his request was heavy. She knew she couldn't afford to let him, or the team, down. At the same time, she wasn't sure how much further they could push without burning out. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk, Amy's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. She felt responsible for the project's success, but she also understood the risk of overextending themselves. The balance between maintaining quality and meeting deadlines had never felt more delicate. She called Sarah for advice. "You've got this, Amy," Sarah said when she explained the situation. "You've been doing great, and you know this project better than anyone. The team respects you. If anyone can figure this out, it's you." Amy smiled, feeling a little more grounded. "But what if pushing harder breaks everything we've worked for? What if I end up making the wrong call?" "Don't worry about that. Every decision comes with risk. The key is staying true to the bigger picture. You've got the intuition for this. Trust it." The following days were a whirlwind of brainstorming sessions, strategy meetings, and brainstorming ideas for how to streamline their workflow. Amy led the charge, collaborating with the engineering and marketing teams to come up with a more efficient schedule without sacrificing quality. She pushed herself harder than ever, waking up early and staying late, making countless revisions to plans and proposals. But despite her best efforts, things began to feel strained. The team was exhausted, morale was dipping, and the pressure from the investors was wearing everyone down. Amy could see it in their eyes. They were starting to crack under the weight. One evening, Amy found herself working late, reviewing the most recent feedback from the investors. She'd been in the office for hours, her eyes tired, but the thought of letting everything fall apart was enough to keep her pushing forward. As she stared at the screen, something clicked. She began to think about the bigger picture, the vision, the reason they started this project in the first place. She realized that in her desire to meet deadlines and please the investors, she had lost sight of what truly mattered: creating something that would change the way people connected with technology. She grabbed her phone and sent a message to Elon. "I think we need to slow down. I know the investors want results quickly, but I believe that if we push too hard, we risk losing the heart of this project. Let's find a middle ground where we can deliver quality without sacrificing our vision." Within minutes, Elon replied, I hear you, Amy. Let's talk first thing tomorrow. I trust your judgment on this. The next morning, Amy entered Elon's office with a mix of anticipation and relief. She had put everything on the line with her message, but now she had a chance to explain her reasoning. Thanks for meeting with me, Elon, she said, sitting across from him. I've been thinking a lot about the balance between moving fast and staying true to what we're trying to build. If we rush this, we risk compromising the emotional connection we're trying to create with users. Elon listened intently, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk as she spoke. I think we need to pause and reassess. Maybe there's a way to manage both quality and speed, but we can't ignore the fact that our product is supposed to do more than just work. It's supposed to connect. Elon leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. After a long silence, he finally spoke. You're right. I've been so focused on hitting targets that I haven't given enough thought to what this project is supposed to represent. We'll find a way to speed things up, but we can't sacrifice the soul of it. Amy let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She felt a sense of victory, not just for her ideas, but for the entire team. She was relieved that Elon understood the core of what they were trying to achieve. I'll make sure we recalibrate, Elon continued. Thank you for pushing me to see that. By the time the meeting ended, Amy felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but she had earned Elon's trust. More importantly, she had learned something valuable. Sometimes, it was okay to slow down to move forward. As she left Elon's office, she passed by the team working in the open space. They were all immersed in their tasks, heads bent over laptops and whiteboards. But now there was a renewed sense of energy in the air. The pressure hadn't disappeared, but it felt like they were finally working with purpose, not just for a deadline. With Elon's support, Amy felt more emboldened than ever. The project was beginning to shift in the direction she had hoped for, but there were still hurdles ahead. The investors were not the only pressure Amy had to contend with. The internal dynamics within the team were starting to show cracks. Some team members were visibly frustrated with the slower pace, and the looming deadlines were causing tempers to flare. But for Amy, the turning point had come. She wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore. She had become a leader. Her confidence had grown, and so had her ability to influence others. Still, with that power came a responsibility she was beginning to understand more fully. It was a crisp Friday afternoon when Amy received an unexpected call from Sarah. Hey, I know you're in the middle of a million things right now, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something. I've been hearing rumors about a possible new hire coming in, someone who could shift things around for you. Amy furrowed her brow. New hire? I haven't heard anything about that. Do you know who? Not exactly, but it sounds like they're looking for someone with a lot of experience in managing high-stakes projects. I thought you should know, just in case. Amy felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The last thing she needed was someone coming in to undermine the progress she'd fought so hard for. But she brushed it off, assuming it was just a rumor. I'll keep an eye out, but thanks for letting me know. I've got enough on my plate as it is, she said, trying to sound more relaxed than she felt. The next week, as Amy was reviewing some new design proposals with the team, she noticed someone sitting in the corner of the room, an unfamiliar face, watching them intently. The man was in his mid-40s, with a sharp, businesslike demeanor and a confident air about him. Elon walked in shortly after, followed by the stranger. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Tom Davis. He'll be joining us as a project advisor, Elon announced, his voice carrying a note of formality Amy hadn't heard before. Tom gave a brief nod and a smile. Looking forward to working with all of you, he said, his eyes scanning the room. Amy could feel the temperature in the room shift slightly. The team had been so used to working independently, so used to pushing boundaries on their own terms, that Tom's presence felt like a disruption. There was no denying that he was highly experienced, but the idea of someone coming in to manage their work was unsettling. The first few days after Tom's arrival were awkward, to say the least. Amy noticed the tension in the air, especially when Tom began suggesting changes to the project's workflow. His suggestions, while well-intentioned, felt like they were trying to rein in the team's creativity. Have you considered making the product simpler? Tom asked during one of their early meetings. Perhaps focusing on fewer features, but refining them to perfection? Amy fought to keep her frustration in check. It wasn't that Tom's ideas were bad, but they didn't align with the vision the team had spent so much time developing. She felt like he was missing the heart of what they were doing. "I understand where you're coming from, Tom," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But part of what makes our product unique is its ambition. We're not just building something functional. We're creating something that changes the way people experience technology." Tom looked at her with an unreadable expression. "And that's exactly why we need to make sure we're not stretching ourselves too thin. Big ideas are great, Amy, but they need to be executed with precision." The tension continued to build over the following weeks. Amy found herself clashing with Tom more and more as he tried to steer the project in a different direction. While his suggestions were often grounded in practicality, they didn't align with the team's creative vision. It became clear that he was trying to exert control over the project in a way that left Amy feeling increasingly sidelined. She had already spent so much time building relationships within the team, earning their trust, and shaping the project. Now, Tom's presence was undermining everything she had worked for. One afternoon, after another difficult meeting with Tom, Amy stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on her chest. She had been navigating this project for so long on her own terms, but now it felt like everything was slipping out of her grasp. She stared up at the sky, willing herself to stay focused, to stay strong. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "How's everything going? I know Tom has been making waves. You good?" Amy couldn't help but laugh softly, even as the frustration bubbled up inside her. She typed back quickly. "Not good. It feels like he's trying to take over everything. I'm struggling to keep the team together and hold on to the vision we've worked so hard for. I'm starting to wonder if I'm even needed here anymore." Sarah's reply was immediate. "You are needed. You've earned your place there. Don't let anyone take that away from you. You've got the bigger picture in mind, and that's something Tom can't understand. Keep pushing forward. You've got this." Amy read Sarah's message again, feeling a wave of gratitude. She knew she couldn't give up now, not after everything they'd been through. The next day, she made a decision. She called a meeting with Elon, Tom, and the core team. As they sat around the table, Amy took a deep breath. She knew this conversation was going to be tough. "Elon, Tom," she began, "I need to address something that's been on my mind. There's been a shift in the way we're working, and I'm not sure it's the right one for the project. We've built something special here, something bigger than just meeting deadlines or hitting targets. We're creating a product that connects with people on a deeper level. And if we start sacrificing that vision for efficiency, I'm afraid we'll lose what makes this project unique." Tom was quick to respond, his voice measured but firm. "I understand what you're saying, Amy, but we can't afford to let sentiment cloud our judgment. The investors want results. If we don't show them we're moving fast, this whole thing could fall apart." Amy met his gaze. "And if we don't stay true to the vision, we'll lose the heart of this project. We'll lose the very thing that makes it different. I'm asking you both to trust me on this one. Let's find a balance that doesn't compromise the core of what we're doing." For the first time in weeks, Elon spoke up with a quiet but steady voice. "Amy's right. We can't just chase results. We need to balance ambition with execution. We've come too far to lose sight of what matters most." Tom didn't argue. He nodded slowly, though Amy could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. Still, there was a shift in the air, a collective decision that they would stand behind the project's vision, no matter how difficult it was to maintain that course. As the meeting ended, Amy felt a sense of relief. She wasn't sure if the battle was truly over, but she had taken a stand, and that was something she hadn't done before. For the first time, she truly believed in her ability to steer the ship, no matter the turbulence. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? After the heated meeting with Tom and Elon, Amy felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be smooth, but she had finally voiced her concerns, and more importantly, Elon had backed her up. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. However, the victory didn't last long. Over the next few days, Amy tried to get back to work. She threw herself into refining the product's features, discussing marketing strategies with the team, and making sure everything was aligned with the original vision. Despite her renewed resolve, the tension between her and Tom didn't dissipate. His presence loomed over the project like a shadow, and every meeting felt like a battle. It was as if they were constantly pulling in opposite directions. But there was something else bothering Amy, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. There were small, subtle shifts in the atmosphere around the office. Tom wasn't the only one making waves. The team, once energized and passionate, seemed increasingly fractured. The familiar camaraderie had started to fade, replaced by cold professionalism. The team members, once united in their enthusiasm, were now looking at each other with suspicion. It was late on a Thursday afternoon when Amy received an unexpected email from one of the developers. Mark. Subject: we need to talk. She opened the email and read the brief but unsettling message. Amy, we need to have an honest conversation. There are things happening within the team that aren't being addressed, and I think we need to clear the air before it gets worse. Can we meet tomorrow? Mark. Her stomach churned. What could this be about? She thought back to the last few weeks and tried to remember if anything had happened that might have caused this tension. She couldn't pinpoint anything specific, but the growing sense of unease gnawed at her. The next day, Amy met with Mark in one of the smaller conference rooms. As soon as she sat down, she could see the concern etched on his face. Amy, I'm not sure how to say this, Mark began, his voice quieter than usual. But there are a lot of people on the team who are starting to feel, I don't know, disconnected. It's like we're all working in silos now. The creative energy that we had in the beginning is gone. People are frustrated. They're not happy with the direction things are going. Amy listened closely, her heart sinking with each word. She had been so focused on navigating her own battles with Tom and trying to keep the project on track that she had overlooked what was happening within the team. She thought back to the tense meetings, the awkward silences, and the lack of collaboration that had started to plague their work. I think a lot of it has to do with how things are being handled now, Mark continued. Tom's been pushing for things to move faster, and it's not just the pace. It's how he's been cutting corners, pushing ideas through without proper discussion. It's like we're being told what to do instead of being a part of the process. Amy felt a deep pang of guilt. She had tried to protect the team, tried to maintain the vision they'd started with. But had she been too focused on managing the bigger picture to notice the cracks forming under the surface? I know Tom's approach has been different, but we're all trying to make this work, Amy said, trying to steady her voice. What can we do to fix it? How do we get back to where we were? Mark sighed. I don't know, but we need to talk openly about it. People are starting to talk behind your back, Amy. They're wondering if this project is even going to succeed if we keep going like this. Amy's mind raced. She never imagined she'd be in this position, caught between keeping the project afloat and keeping the team together. She had no idea that the discontent was so deep. Thanks for being honest with me, Mark, Amy said, her voice low. I'll do my best to address this. We need to regroup as a team, no matter what. As Amy left the conference room, she felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She hadn't realized just how fragile the situation had become. She wasn't just managing a project anymore. She was managing a team in crisis. That night, Amy stayed late, trying to formulate a plan. She knew she had to act fast, before the discontent spread further. She couldn't let everything fall apart now, not when they were so close to achieving something monumental. But as she sat at her desk, reviewing the product's roadmap, she couldn't shake the nagging thought that something was wrong. Tom's influence was growing, and it was pushing the team into a corner. She had already spoken with Elon about her concerns, but what if Elon wasn't seeing the full picture? What if his trust in Tom was clouding his judgment? Amy couldn't ignore the feeling that she was fighting a losing battle. She had always prided herself on her ability to keep a team together, but now it felt like every decision she made only added to the tension. The next morning, Amy gathered the core team for an impromptu meeting. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she had to confront the issues head-on. When everyone was seated around the table, Amy took a deep breath and spoke. I've been hearing some concerns from a few of you, and I want to make sure we clear the air. This project has always been about collaboration, about trusting each other and pushing boundaries together. But lately, I've noticed a change. I know that Tom's presence has shaken things up, and I know some of you are feeling frustrated. So I want to hear from you. What's been bothering you?" For a moment, no one spoke. The silence hung in the air, thick with tension. Then, one by one, team members started to speak up. Sarah was the first. "I think we're being rushed," she said, her voice tight. "Tom's been pushing us to meet deadlines that don't make sense. We're not getting the space to experiment, to try things out. It feels like we're just trying to finish things, not make them right." Amy nodded, understanding the sentiment. It wasn't just the pace. It was the feeling that the team's creativity was being stifled in the name of efficiency. "I agree," said another team member, Jenna. "It's not just the deadlines. It's the way things are being communicated. We're not being included in the process anymore. We're being told what to do, and it's like we've lost our voice." Amy's heart sank. She had let this happen. She had been so focused on maintaining the project's vision and keeping Elon and Tom happy that she had neglected the team's needs. "I hear you," Amy said, her voice soft but firm, "and I want you to know that I'm committed to fixing this. We're in this together, and I'll make sure we find a way to move forward without sacrificing the things that made this project great in the first place. I'll talk to Elon and Tom, but we need to work together as a team. This is our project, not just mine or anyone else's." The room fell silent again, but this time, there was a shift. Team members exchanged glances, and a sense of relief washed over the group. They weren't alone. Amy wasn't going to abandon them. After the meeting, Amy set up a one-on-one with Elon. She knew this conversation was crucial. "Elon," Amy began as they sat down, "I need to talk to you about something important. The team is struggling. The tension between Tom's approach and the team's creativity is creating serious friction. I think we need to reevaluate the way we're working." Elon listened carefully, his eyes narrowing as she spoke. "I've been hearing some of the same things, but we can't afford to lose momentum. The investors are waiting, and they're getting anxious. I know, but the team is the key to success here. Without them, without their trust and creativity, we won't get where we need to go. I'm asking for your support in helping us find a better balance." Elon was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "All right, Amy. I trust you. We'll figure this out." Despite Amy's determination to keep the team together, the tensions that had been building over the past few weeks continued to fester. The conflict between Tom's vision for the project and the creative energy of the team seemed irreparable. No matter how hard Amy tried, it felt as if the threads of unity were slowly unraveling. The team's frustration wasn't the only issue she was dealing with. Elon's support, while invaluable, was starting to feel distant. There were moments when he seemed too absorbed in his own world of high-level decisions, leaving Amy to manage the day-to-day struggles. Tom, on the other hand, was becoming more authoritative, his recommendations often overriding the team's ideas without much discussion. Amy had tried to maintain a balance between the two, keeping Tom's pragmatism in check while protecting the creative spirit of the team. But it was becoming harder and harder. Each decision she made seemed to alienate one faction or the other. The weight of it all was wearing on her. It was a Friday morning when the breaking point came. Amy was in the middle of reviewing some final prototypes when she received an unexpected call from Sarah. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. "Amy, we need to talk. It's about Tom. Things are getting worse, and I'm afraid it's going to blow up soon if we don't act." Amy's heart skipped a beat. She quickly excused herself from the meeting and stepped outside to take the call. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "It's not just the team anymore," Sarah said, her voice low. "I've been hearing things from the investors. They're not happy with the progress. They think we're wasting time, and they're starting to listen to Tom more than to you. They don't see the value in the creative direction anymore. They just want results. Fast." Amy felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The investors had always been a looming presence, but now it seemed like their impatience was becoming a real threat. What are they saying exactly? They want to see the product moving faster. They're pushing for cuts in the scope, less risk, more marketable features, basically the complete opposite of what we've been aiming for. Tom's been backing them up, telling them that the project's too ambitious. Amy clenched her fist. What does Elon think about all this? "He's caught in the middle," Sarah replied. I don't think he's fully aware of how bad it's gotten. I think Tom has him convinced that the way forward is to follow the investor's lead. I don't know if Elon sees the bigger picture anymore. Amy? He's not in the weeds like you are. Amy's mind raced. The walls were closing in. The team's morale was already at rock bottom, and now the investors, the very people who were supposed to be supporting them, were pressuring her to compromise everything she had worked for. If she couldn't turn this around, the project and her career could implode. She hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of Sarah's words sink in. The air around her felt heavy, the uncertainty of what was to come pressing down on her chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Amy's mind was consumed by the growing sense of impending doom. She met with Tom, trying to push back against his suggestions, but his influence over the project seemed stronger than ever. He had become increasingly dismissive of her input, brushing aside her concerns with ease. Every conversation felt like a battle of wills, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting. By the end of the day, Amy knew she had to act. She couldn't let the project slip away from her, couldn't let it turn into something that she no longer recognized. The fight for creative control, for the integrity of what they had built, had reached its climax. She needed to have one final conversation with Elon. Amy sat across from Elon in his office late that afternoon. The room was dimly lit, the evening sun casting long shadows across the walls. She had rehearsed what she was going to say, but now that the moment had arrived, her words felt inadequate. Elon, we need to talk about where this project is headed, Amy began, her voice steady but filled with the weight of everything she was feeling. The investors are pressuring us for faster results, and Tom is backing them up. The team is losing faith in what we're doing, and the creative direction that we started with is slipping away. Elon raised an eyebrow, but he didn't interrupt. He sat back in his chair, listening, his expression unreadable. I know you're focused on results, Amy continued, but I think we're at a critical point. If we give in to the pressure and sacrifice our vision just to meet these deadlines, we'll lose everything that made this project special. The team is already starting to fracture. We're not just fighting external pressure, we're fighting each other. She paused, searching his face for any sign of understanding. I'm asking for your help, Elon. I need you to back the vision, not just the numbers. I need you to stand by the team, even if it means making some tough decisions. If we don't protect what we've built, it'll all fall apart. Elon didn't respond right away. He leaned forward, fingers tapping on his desk as he processed her words. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, his tone more serious than usual. I've been caught up in the pressure, Amy. The investors are breathing down my neck, and I thought the best way to move forward was to keep them happy. But you're right. We can't compromise the integrity of the project. If we lose that, we lose everything. Amy felt a surge of relief, but also a sense of trepidation. She knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. So what do we do now? She asked, her voice softer, more vulnerable than usual. Elon looked at her, a moment of quiet resolve passing between them. We take a step back. We reevaluate. I'll talk to the investors, and I'll make sure they understand the value of the vision you've been pushing, and we'll find a way to get the team back on track. Together. As Amy walked out of Elon's office, she felt a renewed sense of hope. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was no longer alone in this fight. Elon was with her. And more importantly, he was willing to take a stand. She wasn't sure what the next few days would bring. But one thing was certain. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The following week was a blur of meetings, phone calls, and frantic emails. The decision to take a step back and reevaluate the project wasn't one that could be made lightly, but Amy had done her part. Elon had spoken with the investors, and the pressure had momentarily eased. But she knew that this reprieve was only temporary. The storm was still on the horizon. Amy had hoped that the tension would die down after Elon's conversation with the investors, but instead, things felt even more strained. Tom seemed to be in full damage control mode, rallying his supporters within the team. Every decision Amy made was scrutinized, every idea she proposed countered. He was relentless, as if every word she spoke only fueled his determination to push the project in a more traditional, risk-averse direction. Amy had never been one to back down from a challenge, but she was starting to feel the weight of the opposition. Tom wasn't just a colleague anymore. He was an adversary, and his influence over the investors and even Elon was growing. One afternoon, as Amy sat in her office reviewing a new batch of designs, Sarah knocked on the door. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired, but she was determined. "Amy, we need to talk," she said quietly. Amy motioned for her to come in, her heart sinking. She had a feeling this conversation wasn't going to be easy. "What's going on?" Amy asked, setting down her papers. "It's Tom," Sarah began, sitting down across from her. "I don't know how to say this, but things are getting worse. He's been talking to the investors behind your back. He's telling them that the team's creativity is going to derail the project, that we're not moving fast enough. He's been painting you as the bottleneck, the one holding everything up." Amy's jaw tightened. "So now he's trying to undermine me directly?" "It's not just that," Sarah continued. "Tom's pushing hard for cuts to the project. He wants to trim down features, cut out the more risky aspects of what we were planning. He's even suggested some completely new directions for the product, ideas that don't align with what we agreed on. It feels like he's trying to take over completely." Amy took a deep breath, trying to process everything Sarah was saying. She knew things had been tense, but this was different. This was a full-fledged power grab. If Tom had already begun to plant seeds of doubt with the investors, it could be catastrophic for the project. "We can't let him do this," Amy said, her voice firm. "We've come too far to let him tear it all down." Sarah nodded. "I know, but we need to be careful. If this turns into an all-out battle, we could lose everything. The investors are already on edge, and if they see a divide within the team, well, it might be game over." Amy leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had been holding out hope that the situation would resolve itself, that the team would come together, and that Elon would be able to rein Tom in. But now it was clear. She had to take control of the situation before it spiraled out of her hands. "I need to confront him," Amy said, her voice low but determined. "Once and for all." Later that afternoon, Amy requested a private meeting with Tom. She knew this was a risky move. Tom had the ear of the investors, and he had been working hard to shape the narrative about the project. But if she didn't stand up to him now, there was a real chance the entire team, and the project, would be lost. Tom arrived in her office shortly after her request, a smug expression on his face. He wasn't worried, not at all. He had the upper hand, or so he thought. "What's this about, Amy?" Tom asked, his tone more dismissive than usual. "I've got a meeting in 15 minutes, so let's make it quick." Amy stood up from her desk and faced him, her posture straight, her eyes focused. "I need to know where you stand, Tom," Amy said, her voice steady but filled with authority. "Because right now, I feel like we're not working toward the same goal anymore. You've been undermining me behind my back, talking to the investors, and pushing your own agenda for the project." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Undermining you? I'm just trying to make sure the project gets done on time. You've been too focused on the creative side of things. Don't you think it's time we made some tough decisions?" Amy's hands clenched into fists. She could feel the old frustration bubbling up, but she couldn't let him see her anger. She needed to be calm, collected. "I'm not against tough decisions," Amy said, "but you're taking this in a direction that compromises everything we've worked for. The team is losing faith, the investors are getting restless, and you're pushing them to make decisions that don't align with the vision we had. What you're doing now isn't helping anyone." Tom's expression hardened. "Look, Amy, I get it. You want to play the hero. You want to save the project, make it all about your vision. But I'm the one who has to deal with the investors. I'm the one who has to make sure this project doesn't fail before it even gets off the ground. You're not the only one with a stake in this." Amy stepped closer to him, her voice low and unwavering. "If we're going to save this project, it's going to be because the team trusts each other. It's going to be because we work together. But right now, you're pushing us all apart. If you don't step back, Tom, I'm not sure how much longer this project will survive." Tom stared at her for a moment, and for the first time, Amy saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. but it quickly disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculated expression. "You'll regret this, Amy," he said, his voice sharp. "You'll see. If you keep pushing the team in this direction, you'll be the one who loses." Amy didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." As Tom left her office, Amy felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The battle lines were officially drawn. She had no doubt that Tom would go to any lengths to seize control of the project, but she also knew that she couldn't back down. Not now. The next day, Amy took action. She called an emergency team meeting, determined to address the growing tensions head-on. As the team gathered around the table, Amy could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She had to make it clear that they were all in this together, that their vision, their passion, their creativity were the things that would drive the project forward, not the corporate pressure from above. "I know things have been tough lately," Amy began, her voice steady but emotional. "There's been a lot of outside pressure, a lot of voices trying to pull us in different directions. But I want to remind all of you why we're here. We're here because we believe in this project, in each other, and in the vision we've built together." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of the team members. "I'm not asking you to follow me blindly, but I am asking you to trust in what we've created. We've come this far together, and I believe we can finish this together. But we have to be united. We can't let anyone divide us." The room was quiet for a moment, but slowly, one by one, the team members nodded. It wasn't going to be easy, and the path ahead would be rocky, but they were ready to fight for what they had built. Amy took a deep breath. The battle was far from over, but she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The following week was a whirlwind of meetings, strategic conversations, and urgent decisions. Amy could feel the pressure mounting on all sides. While her confrontation with Tom had been a necessary step, it hadn't resolved anything. If anything, it had escalated the situation. Tom's allies within the team were more vocal than ever, and the investors were growing impatient again. But despite the tension, Amy felt a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't afford to back down. Not now. Elon had promised her his support, but she was beginning to realize that the battle was far more complicated than she had initially thought. Tom's influence over the investors was powerful, and his ideas for the project were starting to gain traction. It was clear now that Amy was fighting not just for her vision, but for the future of the project itself. One late afternoon, as Amy was deep in her office, reviewing the latest round of investor feedback, her phone buzzed. It was Elon. "Hey, Amy, can you meet me in the conference room in 10? There's something we need to discuss." Elon's voice was calm, but tinged with something that made her sit up straighter. "Of course. I'll be there in a minute," she replied, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this conversation could be pivotal. As she walked to the conference room, her mind raced. The last few weeks had been a blur of tension and frustration. Every decision she made felt like a delicate balance between sticking to the project's original vision and appeasing the investors who were demanding more results. She didn't want to compromise, but the stakes were high. She had to figure out how to move forward without losing everything they had worked for. When Amy entered the conference room, Elon was already sitting at the table, his usual calm demeanor making it hard to gauge how serious the situation was. He motioned for her to sit. "Amy, I've been thinking about everything you've said," Elon began, his voice steady but purposeful. "And I think we need to make a choice. I can't keep sitting in the middle of this." "You're right. The project's vision is slipping, and I've been letting Tom steer the ship. I've been too focused on managing the investors, but that's not enough anymore." Amy felt a surge of hope. "You're with me then?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "I'm with you," Elon confirmed. "But we need to act quickly. Tom has the investors' ear, and he's already starting to get them to pull in a different direction. If we don't make our move soon, we'll lose control of this project, and I'm not going to let that happen." Amy felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, she had the support she needed, not just from Elon, but from someone who truly understood the stakes of what they were trying to achieve. The conversation quickly shifted to strategy. Elon made it clear that they needed to pull the investors back to their side and fast. The only way to do that, he believed, was to show them a clear path forward, a path that demonstrated the value of Amy's creative vision without sacrificing the project's potential for profitability. "Let's organize a demo," Elon suggested, his eyes lighting up with the familiar spark of innovation. "Something that showcases where we're headed with the product. Not just the end result, but the process. Let's show them what makes our team different. We don't just create products, we create solutions." Amy nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. A demo could work. It would give them the opportunity to shift the narrative, to show the investors that they weren't just building something flashy, but something that would truly disrupt the market. Something worth betting on. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Amy, Sarah, and the core team members worked around the clock to pull together a compelling demo that would both impress and convince the investors of the project's value. It wasn't just about showcasing the technology. It was about selling the idea that their vision was the right one. Amy spent long hours perfecting the presentation, collaborating with the designers and engineers to make sure every detail was perfect. She knew that this was their last chance to prove they could succeed without compromising everything they had worked for. The demo day arrived, and the team was on edge. The conference room was filled with the usual mix of investors, executives, and key stakeholders, all eager to see the next phase of the project. Amy stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Elon was by her side, looking calm and collected as always. "We've been working on something special here," Amy began, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension building inside her. "This project isn't just about creating a product, it's about creating a new way of thinking. A way that challenges the norms and pushes the boundaries of what's possible." She gestured to the large screen behind her, which flickered to life with the first slides of the presentation. The demo was a blend of sleek design, powerful technology, and innovative solutions that would give them the edge in a crowded market. As the slides progressed, the team revealed key aspects of their work, breakthrough features that could set the product apart from competitors, and how they were solving problems that no one else was tackling. Elon stepped forward, giving a brief overview of the business strategy, showing how the product's unique qualities would make it not just a market disruptor but a long-term success. Throughout the demo, Amy could see the shift in the room. The investors, who had previously been skeptical, were beginning to nod, to lean forward, to engage. For the first time in weeks, she felt the team's efforts recognized. They weren't just making something pretty, they were making something that could change the world. As the demo wrapped up, Amy and Elon exchanged a quiet glance. They had done it. They had turned the narrative around. Later that afternoon, as the investors filed out of the room, one of the senior partners, Henry Lawson, approached Amy and Elon. His expression was guarded, but there was something in his eyes, something like approval. "You've got my attention," Henry said, his tone measured but intrigued. "I wasn't sure where this project was going, but now I see it. We're going to need to have another conversation, a deeper one, about where this is headed, but I'm on board." "You've got a window, Amy. Don't waste it." Amy allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew the fight wasn't over. The investors might be on her side for now, but Tom was still lurking in the background. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. As Amy and Elon walked out of the conference room, she felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. "We did it," Elon said, his voice quiet. "Now we just need to make sure we don't lose focus. The real work starts now." Amy nodded. "Let's keep pushing. We can't stop now." In the wake of the successful demo, there was a brief, fleeting moment of calm. The investors were on board, Elon was back in his element, and the team's morale had been lifted. The road ahead was still fraught with obstacles, but for the first time in weeks, Amy allowed herself a small breath of relief. The following days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and more planning than Amy had seen in a long time. It was clear the project had regained some momentum, but the war was far from over. Tom wasn't one to back down easily. Even though Amy had gained some ground, she knew he was already regrouping, ready to make his next move. At the same time, Amy was keenly aware of something else. The pressure was still on. The investors had given them a window, but that window wasn't open indefinitely. They had a limited time to prove that their approach was the right one. Amy sat at her desk one afternoon, staring at her computer screen. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing second. She could feel the weight of everything hanging over her. The success of the project, her team's future, and, most of all, her vision. It all depended on the decisions they made now. Elon had been pushing for a bold new feature to be included in the product, one that could potentially revolutionize the market. It was risky, perhaps more risky than anything they had proposed before. But Elon's confidence in the idea was undeniable. Still, Amy hesitated. The risk was immense. If they moved forward with the feature and it failed, it could undo everything they had built so far. But as she sat there, thinking, her mind kept coming back to one thing. The investors wanted something different. They didn't want a safe bet. They wanted a product that would shake up the industry. The investors didn't just want results. They wanted disruption. Later that day, Amy met with Sarah and the rest of the core team to discuss the next steps. The room was tense, everyone acutely aware of what was at stake. They were united in their goal, but there were divisions even within the group. "Amy," Sarah said, breaking the silence, "we need to talk about Elon's new idea, the one for the feature. It's brilliant, I won't deny that, but it's also a huge leap. Are we really ready to go all in on something like that?" "I'm not sure," Amy admitted, "but the investors want disruption. And if we don't take a risk now, we could end up with a product that's just another Me Too in the market." "I get that," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm, "but we've been moving fast, and things are starting to feel like we're pushing too hard. Do we really want to risk everything on a feature that might fail? I don't want to be the one holding the bag if this doesn't work." The room fell silent as everyone processed the weight of Sarah's words. Amy knew the stakes were high, but at the same time, she knew that if they didn't take risks now, they might not get another chance. "I don't have an easy answer," Amy said finally, "but I do know one thing. We can't afford to play it safe anymore. If we want to win, we have to take the leap. We have to believe in this project, no matter the cost." The team agreed, albeit reluctantly, to move forward with the new feature. It was a calculated risk, but a risk nonetheless. Amy could feel the eyes of her team on her. They were trusting her to lead them through the uncertainty, to push them into the unknown. As the days turned into weeks, the development process accelerated. The team worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Amy's confidence in the project began to grow, but so did her anxiety. The investors were watching, and the pressure to deliver was intensifying. They had to prove themselves now. But as Amy continued to manage the day-to-day demands of the project, Tom was never far from her mind. She had managed to beat him back for now, but he wasn't going away. She could feel the tension in the air whenever they crossed paths. Tom had his own ideas for the project, and he was not afraid to voice them, even if it meant undermining Amy's authority. The investors were still waiting for results, and Tom's subtle efforts to steer the team in his direction were starting to have an impact. Though he was careful not to make any overt moves, Amy could tell that he was working behind the scenes to regain control of the narrative. It wasn't just about the project anymore, it was about power. One evening, as Amy was wrapping up her day, she received a text from Elon. "Meet me for dinner tonight. We need to discuss something important." Amy's stomach sank. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Dinner with Elon wasn't uncommon, but the tone of his message was different. Something was coming. At the restaurant, the atmosphere was quiet and intimate, a far cry from the tense corporate settings they had been in for weeks. Amy ordered a glass of wine, hoping it might settle her nerves. When Elon arrived, he looked unusually serious. "Thanks for meeting me, Amy," Elon said, settling into his seat across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed, and I think it's time we take things to the next level." Amy raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Elon, what's going on?" she asked, sensing that there was more to his words than he was letting on. He took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. "Tom has been moving behind the scenes. The investors are getting restless again. There's talk of bringing in someone new, someone to help streamline the team and get the project back on track. I think you know who they're talking about." Amy's heart dropped. "You don't mean—" "Elon, no. They can't be serious about this. Not after everything we've built." "I'm afraid they are," Elon said, his voice low. "I've been trying to buy us time, but Tom's making moves, and he's got leverage now. If we don't act quickly, we could lose everything." Amy felt the world tilt. Tom was moving again, and this time it seemed like he had more support than ever. The investors were starting to question the direction of the project, and if they brought someone new on board, it could signal the end of everything she had worked for. She had trusted Elon's judgment, but this was different. It was a battle for survival now. The pressure was on. The calm they'd enjoyed after the demo was quickly evaporating, replaced by a brewing storm that threatened to tear the team apart. The following days felt like a blur. Amy's mind raced from one decision to the next, and yet, despite all the strategic planning and tireless work, the shadow of Tom's influence hung over everything. The investors' unease was palpable. They were waiting for results, and Amy was running out of time. In the days following her dinner with Elon, Amy couldn't shake the growing tension. Tom's subtle machinations were slowly eroding her confidence, and every meeting felt like a tug-of-war for control. No matter how much progress they made, there was always a new challenge, a new problem to solve. The team was working harder than ever, but they were spread thin. Amy could feel it in the air, the underlying frustration, the fatigue. At the same time, Elon had doubled down on his support, constantly reassuring her that they were still on the right track. But his words were starting to feel hollow. There was a crack in the foundation, something unspoken that was starting to surface. Amy couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, Amy walked into her office, already exhausted from a full day of meetings and presentations. She had just finished discussing the new product features with the development team when Sarah entered with a concerned look on her face. "Amy, I think you need to see this," Sarah said, holding up her phone. Amy's heart skipped a beat as she took the phone from Sarah's hand. The headline of the article glaring at her was enough to make her stomach drop. New leadership in talks for high-profile project. Investor pressure mounts. "I thought you said we had time," Sarah said quietly. "What is this?" Amy sat down at her desk, staring at the article. The piece was brief, but it made it clear that the investors were exploring the option of bringing in a new team leader, someone with more experience in handling high-stakes projects. And while the article didn't directly name Amy, it didn't take much reading between the lines to see that it was a veiled reference to the current leadership struggles. Her mind raced. This was exactly what Elon had warned her about. The investors were losing faith, and now they were openly discussing alternatives. Was it too late to reverse the tide? "Sarah, can you make sure we get ahead of this?" Amy asked, her voice barely steady. "We need to have a response ready for the investors. We can't let this narrative gain any more traction." "I'll start drafting something for the press," Sarah replied. "But we might need to consider a more direct approach with the investors. Let's face it, if they're thinking about replacing you, they won't be swayed by a press release." Amy nodded, her stomach twisting. The battle for control was escalating, and every day, it seemed like the odds were stacked higher against her. The investors were no longer merely uncertain. They were actively seeking a way out. They had once believed in her, but now, it seemed, they were looking for an exit strategy. And Tom was nowhere to be found, his absence only amplifying his quiet sabotage. Later that night, Elon called. Amy didn't wait for pleasantries. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "The investors are already talking about replacing me. This isn't just rumors anymore. It's real. They're actively looking for someone else to lead." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I saw the article," Elon finally replied. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of concern in his tone. "Listen, Amy, I've been thinking. We need to take control of the narrative before it gets out of hand. But it's going to require a major shift in strategy. You're not going to get out of this by playing defense. We need to go on the offense." Amy felt a surge of frustration. "What does that mean exactly, Elon? What more can we do? We've been working non-stop to prove ourselves. I can't change their minds if they've already decided." "I'm not saying it'll be easy," Elon replied, "but you're still in a strong position. You have the vision, the right product. You just need to remind them of that. If they're looking for leadership, show them what you can do. Maybe it's time for us to go bigger. Show them a grander vision for the future of this project." Amy took a deep breath, thinking over Elon's words. He was right, of course. The investors were looking for someone to take control, to demonstrate that they had the vision and the courage to lead the project to success. But was she that person? Had she lost her way in the shuffle of investor demands, internal pressure, and Tom's sabotage? She looked at the window, where the city lights twinkled like distant stars. The weight of the decision settled on her chest. She couldn't back down now. If she lost this, it wouldn't just be the end of the project. It would be the end of everything she had worked for. The next day, Amy called an emergency meeting with the core team. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Sarah and the developers were already there, waiting for her to speak. "I've just read the article," Amy said, her voice steady but forceful. "The investors are thinking about replacing me. But we're not giving up without a fight. We're going to show them who we really are. We have the vision, and we have the product. We just need to make sure we remind them of that." Sarah nodded. "What do you need from us?" "I need everyone's commitment to pushing forward. No more half measures. We're going to take this project to the next level, and we're going to show the investors we're not just trying to get by, we're trying to change the game. We need to show them the future of this company. We need to give them something bigger than they expected." The team exchanged determined looks. There was no more hesitation. Amy's words had reignited something in them. They knew the stakes, and they knew what needed to be done. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, reimagining their approach to the project. Elon, despite his personal reservations, threw his full support behind the effort. They would showcase the product's potential in ways no one had expected, far beyond what the investors had seen in the previous demo. This would be a turning point. But even as Amy and her team pushed forward, she knew that the battle wasn't over. Tom was still waiting, still working behind the scenes, pulling strings and building alliances. Every decision she made now would have consequences, and every move she made would bring her one step closer to either securing her place or losing everything. As Amy sat in her office late that night, preparing for the upcoming presentation, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Elon. "Tomorrow's meeting is crucial. You need to be ready for everything. Tom won't back down." The warning felt like a cold gust of wind. Tom's efforts had been relentless, and Amy realized that no matter how much they prepared, no matter how hard they fought, the storm wasn't over yet. The day of the presentation had arrived. The air in the office was thick with tension. The team was ready, but their nerves were undeniable. Amy, usually the calm center of the storm, found herself pacing in her office, wrestling with the weight of the moment. This presentation would either solidify her position or doom the project. Amy gathered her thoughts as she stared at the whiteboard. The final plan sketched out in front of her. The new features were bold, perhaps more ambitious than anything they'd ever proposed. It wasn't just a product demonstration. It was a declaration of their future, a vision that would force the investors to see beyond the numbers and the metrics. Sarah and the core team had worked around the clock. There had been sleepless nights, heated debates, and moments of self-doubt, but they were united in this. This wasn't just about proving the product. It was about proving to the investors, to the team, and to herself that they had what it took. But Amy knew this wouldn't be an easy sell. The investors had already begun to question her, and Tom's quiet manipulations were still present. The pressure to deliver something extraordinary was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. The presentation was in just a few hours. Sarah knocked on the door and entered, her face tense but determined. "Amy, everything's set up in the conference room. The investors are already in position. Are you ready?" Amy took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's make sure we hit every note. This is our moment." Sarah nodded. "We've got your back. Let's show them what we've got." In the conference room, the investors were already seated, their faces unreadable. Elon had arrived earlier and was quietly conferring with a few of the team members, his usual confidence tempered by the gravity of the situation. Amy could feel the weight of the room as she entered, her steps measured but firm. There was no room for doubt anymore. This was her chance to not only save the project, but to remind everyone in that room who had the vision. She nodded at the team to get started, and the presentation began. The room fell silent as Sarah clicked through the slides, detailing the evolution of the product. The team walked the investors through every feature, every iteration, showcasing the bold new ideas they had worked on over the past few days. Elon chimed in at key moments, adding his weight and credibility to the pitch. Everything had been rehearsed meticulously, every angle covered. And then, Amy stood up to speak. "Thank you for your time," Amy began, her voice steady but carrying a palpable tension. "Today, we're not just here to show you a product. We're here to show you a future. A future that we believe will change the way the market operates. A future where innovation and disruption take center stage. You've seen what we've built so far, but what we're about to show you isn't just a product. It's the beginning of something much bigger." She paused, letting her words sink in. Amy clicked to the next slide, revealing the bold new feature that would set the product apart from anything else in the market. It was a leap forward, a game-changing idea that could revolutionize the industry. The feature wasn't just innovative, it was visionary. It was everything the investors wanted, a sign that they weren't just playing it safe. They were thinking about the future. "Here's where we go beyond what anyone expects," Amy continued, her voice now gaining momentum. "This is where we leap forward, not just in terms of technology, but in how we're going to change the way people experience this product. This feature," she clicked again to reveal a prototype on screen, "is the key to disrupting the entire industry. And we're ready to make it a reality." The room was silent for a moment. Amy could feel the weight of every investor's gaze, but she didn't falter. She met their eyes, one by one. The tension was thick, and she knew this was the moment of truth. Would they believe her? Would they see the potential of what she was offering, or would they dismiss her once and for all? Finally, one of the investors, a woman named Clara, spoke. "Impressive," she said, her tone cautious but intrigued. "But Amy, this is a significant step. It's risky. It's bold. But are we sure this is the right move? Are we really ready to go all in on something like this?" Amy's heart raced, but she had been prepared for this. She took a deep breath and looked Clara in the eye. "Clara, let me ask you this. When we started this project, did we play it safe? Did we settle for the status quo? No. We took a risk because we believed in this idea. We believed in what we could do. And I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to trust that this team has the ability to see this vision through. We are ready." The room fell silent again. Amy could feel her pulse quicken, but she stayed calm. She had done everything she could. The product was more than ready. The vision was there. Now it was up to the investors. After what seemed like an eternity, Clara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "All right, Amy, you've convinced me. Let's see where this takes us." One by one, the other investors nodded in agreement. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. They weren't fully sold yet, but Amy had bought them time. She had made her case, and for now, that was enough. As the meeting ended, Amy's team exhaled as one, their shoulders relaxing in unison. They had done it. The presentation had gone better than anyone had expected, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like they had gained a significant advantage. But Amy knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. She walked out of the room, her mind still spinning, but the weight on her shoulders had lightened, if only a little. The investors had seen the vision, at least for now. They had bought into the future she had promised. But Tom's shadow was still out there, lurking. Later that evening, Amy sat alone in her office, staring at the city lights once again. She allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The storm hadn't passed, but they had survived another round. For now, that was enough. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elon. "Well done, Amy. That was a hell of a pitch. But don't forget, this isn't over. Tom won't quit. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Amy smiled faintly, her eyes narrowing with determination. She wasn't done yet. She couldn't afford to be. In this chapter, Amy delivers a high-stakes presentation to the investors, showcasing a bold new feature that could change the trajectory of the project. The investors are initially hesitant, but Amy's unwavering confidence and vision win them over, for now. However, even as she gains ground, she knows that the battle isn't over. Tom is still out there, and the pressure will continue to mount. This chapter marks a turning point, where Amy secures temporary victory but prepares for the challenges that lie ahead. The relief from the successful presentation was short-lived. Amy knew it was only a matter of time before the next wave of challenges came crashing down. The investors were on board, for now, but their confidence could evaporate as quickly as it had appeared. And Tom? Amy could practically feel his presence lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The following week, Amy buried herself in work, trying to push the project forward while keeping the investors happy. Sarah, Elon, and the rest of the team were pushing themselves to the limit, working overtime to refine the product and develop a comprehensive plan for the next phase. There were constant meetings, calls with suppliers, and updates for the investors. Everyone was tired but determined. But as Amy sat in her office late one night, scrolling through emails, one particular message caught her eye. It was from Tom. The subject line simply read, "Let's talk." Her pulse quickened. Amy hadn't heard from Tom directly in weeks, and she knew he was the last person who had her best interests at heart. With a sigh, she clicked on the email. "Amy, I hear things are going well, but let's be honest. You and I both know that the game has just begun. You've managed to buy yourself some time, but there's still a long road ahead. If you want to make it through this, you'll need a much stronger hand at the wheel. Let's meet and discuss how we can fix the real problems." Tom. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Tom wasn't just passive-aggressively undermining her. He was laying out the stakes clearly. The battle for leadership of this project was far from over, and his offer for a meeting was his way of testing her, pushing her into a corner. Amy stared at the email for a long moment. She had two options: ignore him and risk further sabotage, or play his game and see what he was up to. Neither option felt particularly appealing. But one thing was clear: she couldn't afford to give up control of the project now. Amy sat back in her chair and called Elon. She didn't want to go into this alone. He had proven invaluable in the past, and she knew she needed his insight now more than ever. "Hey, Amy," Elon answered almost immediately. "What's up?" "I just got an email from Tom," Amy said, her voice tight with frustration. "He wants to meet." "Ah," Elon replied, his voice a little too calm. "Didn't take long. What does he want this time?" "I don't know, but the message was clear. He's not backing off, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea to just ignore him. What do you think?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Elon spoke, his voice measured. "Look, Amy, we both know Tom. He's a chess player, and you're just one of the pieces. He's going to keep pushing until he gets what he wants. I'm not saying you need to give him an inch, but you also can't let him control the narrative." Amy nodded, even though Elon couldn't see her. "I don't want to play his game, but I don't think I have a choice. I'm going to meet him tomorrow, but I need to know that I'm not walking into a trap." "Then don't walk into it alone," Elon said firmly. "I'll be with you. Let's figure out what he's really after." The next day, Amy and Elon met in her office to prepare for the meeting with Tom. It was a tense affair, with neither of them saying much. Amy felt the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. She had come this far, but Tom's machinations had only just begun. The stakes were rising. "We need to play this carefully," Elon said as he paced the room. "Tom doesn't care about the project. He cares about power. And right now, you're the obstacle to that." Amy rubbed her temples. "I don't know if I can keep playing defense like this. Every time I think I've gained ground, it feels like he's right there, waiting for me to slip up." "You're not slipping up," Elon said, his voice intense. "You've got this. You've proven that. But if you want to keep control of this project, you need to take the offensive. Don't let him dictate the terms." The meeting with Tom took place in a quiet, upscale cafe downtown. It was the kind of place where deals were made, or broken, over expensive coffee and hushed conversations. Amy and Elon arrived early, sitting in a corner booth, waiting for Tom to make his appearance. The tension was almost unbearable. Finally, Tom walked in, looking as suave and composed as ever. His eyes locked on Amy immediately, and there was a glint in them, a mix of curiosity and calculation. "Am I late?" Tom asked, his tone dripping with faux politeness. "Not at all," Amy replied coolly, trying to keep her emotions in check. "We were just getting settled. Please, have a seat." Tom sat down across from them, his eyes flicking between Amy and Elon. His demeanor was relaxed, but Amy could see through it. He was sizing her up, looking for weaknesses. "So, you wanted to meet," Tom began, leaning back in his chair. "I assume this isn't just to talk about the weather." "I don't have time for games, Tom," Amy said, her voice firm. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to undermine me at every turn, and it's not going to work. Tom smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, Amy, you're so quick to jump to conclusions. I'm just here to offer some advice. You've done well, but let's be honest. You're in over your head. This project needs more than what you can give it. It needs someone with experience, someone who can really drive it to success. Amy felt her blood boil, but she didn't let it show. You don't get to decide what this project needs, Tom. I've been leading it from the start, and I'm not about to let you take over now. There was a long silence between them. Elon had been quiet so far, observing the exchange. Now he leaned forward slightly, his voice low but commanding. I think what Amy is trying to say, Elon began, is that we're not interested in your advice. We've got a plan, and we're sticking with it. If you've got something constructive to offer, fine. But if you're just here to sow doubt and push your own agenda, then I think we're done. Tom's expression faltered for a split second, but only a split second. He recovered quickly, his smile returning, albeit with a sharper edge. You're making a mistake, both of you, he said, his voice icy. But fine. We'll see who's really in control when all this is said and done. With that, Tom stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He offered them a mock salute and walked out of the cafe without another word. Amy and Elon sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the encounter hanging heavily between them. Well, that went about as expected, Amy said, exhaling slowly. Elon nodded, his face tight. He's not going to let up, but now we know where he stands. We've got to be ready for whatever move he makes next. Amy looked at Elon, determination in her eyes. We will be. And we're not backing down. The days after the confrontation with Tom were eerily quiet. Amy kept waiting for the next attack, the next disruption, but for the moment, Tom seemed to have retreated into the shadows. The lack of immediate action should have been comforting, but instead, it was unnerving. Amy knew he wouldn't back off so easily. No, Tom was playing a longer game, and she was just waiting for him to make his next move. The team continued to work tirelessly, focused on meeting their deadlines for the next product iteration. There were new challenges ahead, technical hurdles, investor demands, and the constant pressure to innovate. But Amy remained calm, pushing forward with a laser-like focus. The air in the office had changed, though. It was heavier now. Everyone knew that things weren't as stable as they seemed. Every decision felt like it could be the one that either pushed them to success or sent them tumbling into disaster. One afternoon, while Amy was deep in a meeting with the team, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Elon. Meet me in the conference room. Urgent. Amy felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She excused herself from the meeting, trying to push aside the sudden wave of anxiety. She was already running on fumes, and the thought of yet another crisis weighed heavily on her. But Elon never called for an urgent meeting unless something serious was going on. When she walked into the conference room, Elon was pacing in front of a large monitor, his face drawn and serious. What's going on? Amy asked, her voice cautious. Elon didn't greet her with his usual smile. Instead, he gestured to the screen, which showed a series of emails and encrypted messages. I just got wind of something disturbing. Amy stepped closer, squinting at the monitor. What is it? Elon clicked on one of the messages, revealing a string of emails between a few of the investors, including Clara, and a third-party consultant Tom had brought in. The emails were full of doubts and concerns about Amy's leadership. Worse, it seemed like Tom had been working behind the scenes to rally support from a faction of the investors. I knew it, Amy muttered under her breath. He's trying to turn them against me. Elon nodded grimly. Exactly. And he's not just talking about the product. He's questioning your ability to lead this project, your vision, everything. He's got some people in his pocket, and they're starting to sway the others. Amy felt her stomach lurch. The trust she had fought so hard to build, the respect she'd earned through her relentless work, was now being eroded from the inside. It was happening again. Tom was pushing all the right buttons, undermining her authority, planting seeds of doubt. And now the investors were beginning to listen. What's the next move? Amy asked, her voice sharp with resolve. Elon's gaze flickered to the emails on the screen. We can't let this slide. We need to confront this head-on before it gets any worse. If Tom's got a faction of the investors working behind our backs, we need to expose it. We need to show them that you're the one who can lead this project, not Tom. Amy thought for a moment. The idea of confronting the investors, especially Clara, whom she trusted, felt like stepping into a minefield. But the longer they waited, the more damage Tom could do. She had to act quickly, decisively. I'm calling a meeting with Clara, Amy said, determination in her eyes. I need to hear it from her. I need to know if she's really on Tom's side, or if she's just being manipulated. Either way, I'll deal with it. Elon nodded. I'll be with you. We've got this. The meeting with Clara was set up for the following morning, and Amy spent the rest of the evening preparing. She knew Clara was a tough negotiator, but this wasn't just about the product or the business anymore. This was personal. Tom had crossed a line, and Amy needed to know where Clara stood. The next morning, they met at a quiet cafe near the office. Clara arrived early, as usual, and greeted Amy with her trademark calm demeanor. Good morning, Amy, Clara said, her voice smooth but guarded. I trust everything is going well with the project? Amy smiled tightly, but didn't let the tension show. Let's cut to the chase, Clara. I know what's going on behind the scenes. Tom's been working his angles, trying to turn you and the other investors against me. So I'm asking you directly, where do you stand? Clara's expression remained neutral, but Amy could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Unease? Amy wasn't sure. I don't know what you mean, Clara replied carefully, taking a sip of her coffee. Tom's been offering suggestions. That's all. Suggestions? Amy echoed, her voice sharp. He's been trying to convince you and the others that I'm not capable of leading this project. He's trying to undermine me at every turn. And I'm asking you, Clara, are you with him or are you with me? There was a long pause. Clara set her coffee down slowly, her fingers tapping lightly on the cup. Amy, I've worked with Tom for years. I've seen what he's capable of. And I won't deny that some of his concerns about your leadership have merit. Amy felt the ground beneath her feet shift. It wasn't the answer she'd been hoping for. You're really going to let him do this? You know he doesn't care about the project. He only cares about power. Clara looked away for a moment, her gaze flickering to the side. It's not that simple. I'm not saying I agree with everything Tom is doing, but I have to think about the bigger picture. The project needs someone with experience, someone who can take it to the next level. And I'm not sure you're that person. Amy's heart sank. So that's it? You're just going to let him take over? Clara met her eyes, her expression unreadable. I'm not saying that, but I think you need to understand that this is bigger than just you or me. It's about what's best for the company. Amy felt the weight of Clara's words hit her hard, but she didn't flinch. If you think Tom is the answer, you've already made your decision, and you'll regret it. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. Clara didn't try to stop her. Amy turned and walked out of the cafe, her mind racing. She didn't need Clara's approval. But this betrayal, this quiet, calculated undermining, was something else entirely. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was war. Elon was waiting outside, his arms crossed, his expression hard. How did it go? She's with him, Amy said, her voice tight with anger. She's playing both sides. Elon didn't respond immediately. His jaw clenched. Well then, I guess it's time to stop playing nice. As they walked back to the office, Amy's mind raced. Tom wasn't just after the project. He was after everything. And now, Amy had to make a choice. Would she fight back with everything she had, or would she let him win? She knew the answer. The weight of betrayal hung heavy on Amy's shoulders as she walked back to the office with Elon. Each step felt like a war with her own mind, her thoughts spiraling around the conversation with Clara. Amy had trusted her, believed in her as an ally. But Clara's hesitation, her inability to fully commit, was a red flag. Worse still, it confirmed what Amy had feared all along. The internal fractures were real, and if she didn't act fast, they might tear everything apart. That afternoon, Amy gathered the team for an emergency meeting. She had a decision to make, and she knew she couldn't do it alone. The last thing she needed was to keep everything under wraps, only to find herself blindsided when the investors finally made their move. The team gathered in the sleek, glass-walled conference room. Sarah, Tom's former ally, sat at the far end, visibly tense. She had seen the writing on the wall too. Then there was Elon, always calm but sharp-eyed, the kind of person who could read a room in a second. They were her support, but Amy could feel the weight of the moment. She cleared her throat, standing up in front of them, and looked around the room. "Things have changed," she said, her voice steady, though inside, she was a storm. "I just got out of a meeting with Clara, and I think we need to face the truth. The investors are divided. Tom is playing his hand, and he's trying to turn them against me. And now, Clara, well, it's clear she's not 100% with us." Sarah's eyes widened, and Elon's brow furrowed. "So, she's already in his camp?" Sarah asked, a sharp edge in her voice. "I don't know if it's full loyalty yet, but she's certainly entertaining the idea," Amy replied. "She's concerned about leadership. She thinks Tom might be the one to take us to the next level." Elon crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "We knew he'd pull this stunt. He's always been about power, never about the project itself." Amy paused, taking a deep breath. "That's why I'm not backing down. We've come too far to let him take control. We need to take a stand. We need to fight back, publicly. If I have to, I'll go directly to the investors. But I can't do it alone." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What exactly are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to stop playing defense. Tom's been moving in the shadows for too long. It's time we drag him into the light. We need to expose what he's really after: power, control, and his ego. He doesn't care about the company. He only cares about winning." Elon nodded slowly. "The question is, how do we expose him without making ourselves look desperate? If we come out too aggressively, we risk losing the investors entirely." "I agree," Amy said. "We need to be strategic. First, I'm going to call a special meeting with the investors. I'll lay it out, show them that I'm the one who's been steering the ship. But I also need you both to keep working behind the scenes. We need evidence. Real evidence that Tom's been trying to manipulate things from the start. If we have that, we can break his power over the investors." "Sounds like a plan," Sarah said, her eyes sharp with purpose. "You've got this, Amy." That evening, as the team dispersed to prepare for the coming storm, Amy couldn't shake the feeling of impending chaos. She knew that her next move would be pivotal. A public confrontation with Tom, an attempt to expose his manipulations, was risky. But if she didn't do something, she could lose everything. She found herself pacing in her office, trying to plan her next steps, when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice guarded. "Amy," came a low, familiar voice on the other end. It was Clara. Amy froze. "Clara?" "I think we need to talk," Clara said, her voice tight, as if she had something to say but wasn't quite sure how to start. "About everything." Amy's stomach clenched. This was the conversation she had been dreading. "I'm listening," Amy said, keeping her tone measured. Clara took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. I've been cautious. Too cautious. I've been listening to Tom, and I didn't want to admit that he's been playing us. I see now that you're the one who has this company's best interests at heart. But it's not just about the project anymore, is it?" Amy's mind raced. "What do you mean?" "It's about control. You're right. Tom doesn't care about the company. He wants to run it, and he'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. He's been feeding me doubts, and I should have trusted you. I should have stood by you." Amy exhaled slowly. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something. Clara had acknowledged the manipulation. It was the first step. "What are you saying, Clara?" Amy asked, feeling the tiniest bit of hope. "I'm with you," Clara replied, her voice firm. "I'll back you up. Let's expose Tom for who he really is." Amy sat back, the weight lifting from her chest. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was the breakthrough she had needed. Clara's support was crucial, and now she had it. The next steps were clear. Confront Tom, expose his schemes, and regain control. The next day, Amy and Elon worked late into the night preparing for the meeting with the investors. They pulled together a presentation that would not only showcase the success they'd achieved with the project, but also reveal Tom's behind-the-scenes manipulations. The evidence was solid, but they needed to present it carefully. It had to be convincing without being too aggressive. The meeting was set for the following morning. Amy stood at the front of the sleek boardroom, the investors seated in front of her. Clara was there, sitting by her side. Tom hadn't shown up yet, but Amy knew he'd be there soon enough. This was his stage, and Amy was prepared to steal the spotlight. She took a deep breath and started. "Thank you for joining me today," Amy began, her voice clear and confident. "I want to start by saying that this project is at a critical juncture. We've made incredible progress, but as we look to the future, I need to address something that's been troubling me. There's been a campaign behind the scenes to destabilize the leadership of this project, and I can no longer stand by quietly." The room fell silent. Amy paused for effect, then continued, laying out the evidence. The secret emails, Tom's attempts to sway the investors, and his manipulation of the team. She made it clear that Tom was more interested in power than the success of the project, and she presented Clara as her ally, a voice of reason who had come to realize the truth. As Amy spoke, she could see the tension in the room. Some investors exchanged glances, while others looked uncomfortable. It was clear they hadn't expected a confrontation like this. Finally, the door opened, and Tom stepped in, his expression cool but guarded. He hadn't expected this, Amy could tell. She didn't let the opening moment of uncertainty pass without capitalizing on it. "Tom," Amy said, her voice steady, "I'm glad you could join us. I think it's time you heard what we've discovered." The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Tom entered. His presence, once commanding, now seemed fragile. Amy could see the slight tightening of his jaw and the flicker of unease in his eyes. He wasn't used to being caught off guard. He was always the one pulling the strings, the one making the moves from behind the curtain. But now, it was his turn to be in the spotlight, and Amy had no intention of letting him slip away. She stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Tom, I think it's time you stop hiding behind your manipulations. The truth is out, and the investors deserve to know what's really been happening." Tom's eyes darkened, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he glanced at Clara, who was sitting beside Amy. Clara met his gaze, but there was no hesitation now. She was with Amy fully, and Tom knew it. "I don't know what this is about, Amy," Tom said, his voice tinged with forced calm. "I've always been supportive of this project. I've only ever wanted what's best for the company." Amy held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't lie, Tom. We have the emails, the secret meetings, the attempts to sabotage my leadership. You've been pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to turn the investors against me, all because you want control. This project isn't about the company to you. It's about your ego." The room was silent, every eye fixed on Amy as she spoke. The investors, those who hadn't already been swayed, were watching her closely, waiting for Tom to defend himself. But Tom's expression faltered. He'd always been a master of smooth words, of presenting himself as the necessary force behind every project's success. But now, that facade was cracking. "I didn't come here for this," Tom muttered, his face growing red. "You're attacking my integrity. You think you can just throw accusations at me?" "I'm not attacking your integrity, Tom," Amy replied. "I'm exposing your lies. And frankly, I'm done playing nice. You've done everything you could to undermine me and take control of this project, but it's over." Tom's gaze flickered to Clara again, searching for support. But Clara didn't flinch. She'd seen enough. She was no longer going to sit in the shadows, letting Tom manipulate her. She spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Amy's right. Tom, we've reviewed everything. You've been trying to divide us, and I won't stand by and watch you tear this company apart." The tension in the room grew thicker. Amy could see the investors shifting in their seats, some now visibly uncomfortable. The tides were turning, but Amy wasn't done. She wasn't going to let Tom wriggle out of this. Not now. Not after everything she'd fought for. "There's no need to hide it anymore," Amy continued, her tone resolute. "The truth is out, and the investors have a choice. They can either continue to back someone who's trying to destroy the company for his own gain, or they can stand with someone who's always put the project first." Amy turned to the investors. "You've seen the results. You know the product works. And you know that the success of this company isn't about one person's ego. It's about the collective effort, the team we've built together. We've done more than just make a product. We've built a future. But that future won't survive if we let someone like Tom take control. There was a long, heavy silence in the room. The investors exchanged looks, some of them clearly uncomfortable, others appearing deep in thought. Amy could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. The outcome of everything. The countless late nights, the sacrifices, the sleepless moments of doubt, all came down to this. And then, after what felt like an eternity, one of the investors, a woman in her 50s named Evelyn, stood up. She was one of the more vocal supporters of Tom, but Amy had always sensed a certain hesitation in her. Evelyn looked around the room, then back at Amy. "Amy's right," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "This company needs leadership that prioritizes the future, not personal agendas. Tom, you've been playing a dangerous game, and it's time for you to step aside." Tom's face drained of color. "You're making a mistake, all of you. You'll regret this," he hissed, but no one seemed to flinch. The boardroom was shifting. The investors, once hesitant, uncertain, were now aligning behind Amy. There was no turning back for Tom. His web of lies had been unraveled, his manipulations laid bare. "I've been trying to be diplomatic," Amy said, her voice filled with quiet power. "But diplomacy doesn't work when someone's trying to tear everything you've built apart. It's time for you to go, Tom. This company doesn't need you anymore." Tom's face twisted in anger, but as he turned to leave, he knew the battle was lost. His grip on the company was slipping away, and no amount of bluster could save him now. With the confrontation over, the room was filled with a strange, almost palpable sense of relief. The investors were no longer divided. They had made their decision. Amy had one. After the meeting, Amy walked out of the boardroom, her mind buzzing, her heart racing. She had done it. She had faced down the people who tried to break her and expose the truth. She had won back control. And though the battle was hard, the war was far from over. Amy knew this. She was ready for whatever came next. Elon met her in the hallway, his expression calm but proud. "You did it, Amy. The board's with you now." Amy let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "It wasn't just me. We did it. All of us." Sarah caught up to them, a grin on her face. "I knew you had it in you. You didn't just save the company. You saved all of us." As they walked toward the elevator, Amy felt a weight lift from her chest. The company was safe, for now, and though there were still challenges ahead, she knew she was no longer alone in this fight. She had her team. She had her supporters. And most importantly, she had her own strength.